is you're from Anderson, and
I am.
this is the first novel I can remember that deals with Anderson extensively. There have been others that have mentioned it and mentioned the area, but this is the first novel I can remember that really mentions Anderson very specifically, specific names of people. And the only question I have so far is Mrs. Dobbins drinking Vim Herb? Is that Vim Herb?
Yep, Ratonga is another, it's like Vim Herb, exactly. And what's so interesting about that is that women of that time, because drinking alcohol was taboo, the men could kind of do that, but not the women, that this Ratonga had 36% alcohol. Hey, that's pretty potent stuff. And that I've been told that they would keep it in the cupboard, in the corner, like with their spices. And so it was kind of a woman's thing. And so Mrs. Dobbins, yes, does drink that. And people, I think you mentioned being a novel based in Anderson. I'm loving it because I'm feeling that there's some pride among folks I talk to in Anderson. Hey, I've got a novel, and I remember where South Carolina National Bank was, and you mentioned Sullivan's Hardware. Now it's a restaurant, and I think, Greg, people are loving going back down memory lane, and I think this novel not only takes them back to another time, that is the early 50s, which a lot of people really want to go back and remember that time, but it takes them specifically back to that time in Anderson.
How did you choose the very specific memories of Anderson? Because, like you're saying, we used to do a morning radio show, and if you started talking about what used to be downtown, the phone lines just blew up. You couldn't get everything in because everybody wanted to talk about it. I remember when this store was here and this place was here. Do you remember this?
I know.
How did you decide what to pick, what to use, what names to use? How did that kind of play out?
Well, the Dobbins name, for example. I wanted a prominent cattle, family here in town. And for some crazy reason, I wanted a D. Why that was in my head, I will never know. So I remember the day I called up my father and said, Daddy, I want the name of a cattle family in Anderson that starts with a D. He said, why D? I said, I don't know, I just want a D. And so he starts down the names. And when he hit Dobbins, Greg, I can't tell you why, it just said, oh, that's it, Dobbins. So it became Dobbins.
Dobbins Bridge Road.
Dobbins Bridge Road, which is out where I live.
So you grew up where?
I grew up in West Anderson at New Prospect.
Okay.
Going down towards the lake, just a little beyond Centerville, kind of on the, So I definitely know Dobbins Bridge Road.
And where else did you go to school?
I went to Centerville. I went to Lakeside, and it kills my heart, But I understand in the name of progress, but it just, because I remember going by Lakeside when it was basically kind of in the midst of being demolished. And I remember looking down there at where the gym used to be, and that was my first school dance. And so you start thinking, oh, those memories. And then I went to Westside. But I'm here a lot.
You're here a
My
lot?
family's here. I'm here at least every 6 weeks.
So you still got a lot of family here. How did they respond to the book?
All my family's here but me.
How's your family respond to the book?
They were proud of me. And I think the other thing is I've always been a little bit of a renegade, a little bit of, can't quite understand me. And I think they go, oh, all of that imagination and creativity that I've always brought to my life. Oh yeah, okay. So they see that it amounted to something.
Now, so you grew up with animals, though?
Oh yeah, I grew up on a 72-acre beef cattle farm.
Okay. So when you say West Side New Prospect, you're not talking about a subdivision, you're talking about
farm, back before
and
they had...
And you were part of 4-H and FFA and all that stuff?
No. I went to one 4-H meeting off of Dixon Road, I think 4th grade. But it was, for girls, it was like sewing, and Greg, I'm just not that girl.
Well, it's changed now, I think.
It's changed now.
You see all the girls with their animals now.
Yeah, but the curtains and the this, and I'm just not real domestic. So me and 4-H didn't really have a life together.
So how did you help on the farm and develop this sort of connection with cattle and cows and stuff?
Greg, when I grew up there, I was around the daily activities, but I didn't, do the 4-H and the steer or the this, that, and the other. I was, what did I do with my time? I was into books. I read a lot. I made good grades, so I was smart. And I was kind of boy crazy also. And so I didn't really have that connection with the farm that I do today. I really don't. I do, though, remember wanting to be a writer. And I do remember taking a peanut butter sandwich and a canteen, an old Army canteen of water, and going back to the highest point of Daddy's land and just sitting by myself in nature and writing. So that's what my connection was, more or less with the land and not the animals. Let me tell you about the connection with the animals and how this book came to be. In 2008, on November 5th, I remember the day, I'm visiting my daddy on that 72-acre farm that I've been telling you about. It was in the midst of what's known as a weaning, when they separate the mamas from the babies. And it's a time, if people aren't aware of it, it's a mournful, like, here's what the sounds are like. Oh, the mama's calling for the babies calling back for the mamas. It's a standard farming practice because if you don't separate them, the mamas need that baby, that nutrition for their new babies inside. So those sounds woke me up about 5 a.m, those woeful sounds. And I put on my clothes, I went out to the pasture, to this fence, this barbed wire fence, where I saw these mama cows pressing against it. Oh, calling for their babies 30 yards away. The babies calling back. And Greg, it was a moment that I felt this kind of electricity in my bones. And I knew in front of me, I knew this was the missing piece of the motherhood story I'd been trying to tell. And I made an instant decision, out with the old book, in with this. And there was a cow in the deep corner whose eyes were cut at me, I felt, asking, can't you bring my baby back? But of course I couldn't. But I said to her, but I can tell your story. That cow became my Mama Red. I bought her from my daddy some days later to save her from slaughter. She was 16 years old, way too old for a mama cow to still be around, but he'd allowed that. And he told me he would sell her. I said, no, you're not. He said, I have to, Bren. I said, no, you don't. I said, how much would she bring? And he said, $1,000. I said, the check's in the mail. So I'm happy to say that Mama Red is still alive, living on the family farm, and she's 25 years old. Greg, people are making field trips to Anderson to meet her. She's become such an important character. So the connection I was telling you about, I made a connection with that mama cow. And I knew then that this was my story and my alone to write. And so out from that came One Good Mama Bone.
You said you saw a lot of kin folks around here. There's a lot of McClains around here.
Oh my! Everybody's here.
Kin to Bolt McClain?
Oh my gosh! Of course, Bolt is the son. I've got to trace it back now.
Yeah, I know how that goes. Yeah.
Bolt's the son of Randall, and I was just on Bellevue a while ago, and I thought of Randall, son of Randall, and Randall would have been my daddy's first cousin.
Okay.
So that would make me third cousin. Right. So Bolt's my third cousin.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because they're the Bolts in my family too.
Wait, Sarah, also, I will mention to people who haven't got the book yet, the audiobook's really good.
Thank you.
You do a great job with the dialects and the audiobook.
Well, thank you so much.
I mean, you're from here, so you know what we sound like.
Yeah.
You're probably the only person to talk about Sarah much.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah.
But, yeah, so the audiobook's really strong.
Thank you.
So I would suggest that people who haven't heard it. But back to Anderson coming out in your writings, what are some of your favorite memories of growing up here? What are some of your favorite things about Anderson? Sounds like even though you don't live here anymore, Anderson's still inside of you.
I mean, a memory flashed just as you said it. I remember, I was probably in the 9th grade or so. I'm a twin, so I've got a partner in crime to go through life with. I remember Christmas, wanting to do some Christmas shopping. I remember my granddaddy, Bren McClain, driving us from the farm downtown to the square in his Mercury. I can remember his cigar in his Mercury and dropping us off. And what my twin and I wanted to do is to Christmas shop. And what we were going to do is go from the square, going down Main Street, all the way to the Belvedere And then my mama was going to come pick us up, say, at 5 o'clock. Yeah.
That's a long, right?
It's a long way.
Walk,
But
yeah.
you know, kids don't. But you see, it was safe. Nobody worried about anything. And I remembered shopping downtown, and Linda and I had a little bit of money, and, you know, going to those shops and just making our way north up Main Street. And I remember we stopped at Little Pig's Barbecue in the Camp Shopping Center, had lunch, and just, you know, having the time of our life. There was a store that we like to shop at called, gosh, am I remembering this? The Village or something like that. They had, my parents couldn't afford alpaca sweaters. That was what was popular back in the time. They were kind of like knockoffs of the alpaca, a lot more loosely knit. And I remember me and Linda going in there and, you know, in the Villager store and then just, you know, taking off and eventually, oh my gosh, getting to Belvedere Plaza. And then maybe shopping at probably J.M. Fields or some of those stores back there. Kresge. And I can still remember the smell of the popcorn. Do you remember that going in?
They had a nice big lunch counter at Kresge over there when you came in.
Big. And I bet you we stopped at Sears, you know, just down the road from where we are right now, because you're making me remember smells. What about, do you remember the smell of the hot nuts in Sears? And so, you know, that was, you're going to make me cry.
Now, did the girls...
It was a very special time in Anderson. I mean, think about, what were we, 13, 14 years old? They would drop us off. And, you know, no cell phones for safety to call in, texting, I got there safely. Dropping off. I think I also recall that my mom said that we could ride the city bus to Belvedere. But Linda and I know, you know, we're kids. We walked the whole way. Oh, it was a wonderful memory.
And if you lived in town, you could ride your bikes from the time you were 6 or 8 downtown and stuff.
Of course.
And not worry about it. Were the girls as excited about the escalators in Bellsville?
Oh, I
as the
loved
boys?
it. Oh, my
Those things
God.
were fast.
I
too.
love the escalators. And what about the elevator? What's those things called at Gallant Belk? Do you remember you get on the elevator and the lady who was sitting there on a stool in that bar, you know, that was across, and then I used to like to ride that, but those escalators up and down of the old Bells building. Oh yeah, totally.
The pneumatic tubes that they would send.
Oh, the pneumatic tubes. I can
messages and stuff.
I can still hear it. Yeah, wonderful. John B. Lee's for Music. Going in, you can buy them for 99 cents. I still have my John B. Lee's card that was punched. I think if you bought 9, you got a 10th one free. You could take those records, those 45s, in the back and listen to them. I'm sure Linda and I stopped in John B. Lee's on our Christmas excursion that day. But isn't it wonderful? I mean, our town,
The Christmas parade was even much bigger production back in the...
And we always stood at Sears. It was a big high wall. That's where our family stood. It was a tradition, the Christmas parade. You know, Anderson growing up here couldn't have been better. Because I had the farm life, which I swear by, what that gives you. And then the town part of Anderson, you know, was just as heartwarming for some of the memories that I just told you about.
You're a little generation later than like talking to my dad and my grandparents, but coming to town was a big deal for farm folks. It was not like the people who lived in town could just walk downtown.
No.
Ride their bike downtown.
No, it was a real big deal. You go to town. You go to town. And like now, it's just, you don't say you go to town, you just say you go. You know, just go. But you actually went to town, go to town. Mom used to have her hair done on Saturdays at the Wilmary. That was, you know, just beyond, down near First Baptist Church. And then, see, Linda and I would get so excited because we'd come up to the square. Woolworths. I remember getting banana splits. And they had this thing, there were balloons, seems like to me. And if you bought a balloon, it had a certain kind of discount in it for the food. I don't remember. But, and the photo booth right there in Woolworths, you know, we'd spend a quarter. I still got those strips of me and Linda in the photo booth. Wonderful, wonderful memories.
Rich memories, too, as for a writer, because when people are remembering small town America, it was what Anderson was in the 50s and 60s. Really.
Well, and you can see I drew on that. I drew on those small town memories. Luther Dobbins, my antagonist, if you will, in the novel, comes to South Carolina National Bank. I remember. Oh, you know him? Oh, by the way, can we talk about that?
Sure.
One of the biggest questions, he asked me what Anderson thinks about my book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the biggest question is I'm getting? Who is Luther Dobbins? I'll say, I don't know. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, no, really, I don't know.
Call me, I'll give him a list.
Yeah, and listen, hey, get this. I was at a book signing in Atlanta, Georgia. There was a man there who grew up in Anderson. In the Q&A session, he raised his hand and said, hey, who is Luther Dobbins? I said, in Anderson. And I said, huh? And he said, I grew up there. Now, I know you know. I said, I don't know. He said, oh, yeah, you do. I said, no, I don't. So what's kind of cool here is people trying to figure out who Luther Dobbins was based on. And Greg, I'm going to tell you, I made him up.
Well, yeah, I mean, but he represents so many people we've all, particularly if you grew up in church. Now, you grew up in church here?
New Prospect Baptist Church.
Okay. So we all knew, certainly we're painting in very broad brushes here, but we all knew those deacons who.
Who?
Yeah, who.
Dot.
Yeah, dot,
Who?
fill in the blank. Who we all knew, wink,
Yeah.
that, were certainly deacons in some way.
Yeah. So I'm loving talking about going down memory lane in Anderson because I think this is what people are really connecting with the book. Certainly here in Anderson, but also from other places because it was a real town that had its own heart.
Also, that you gave birth to a character that people believe is a real guy. That's amazing. That's what you're shooting for when you write. When people
you're
read
right.
it, they think this is a real person.
It
that
is
you're
a real
just
person.
reporting about.
Yeah, they do. Of course, they also asked me about Sarah, my main character, who she was based on. And people will guess, was that your mother or was that your grandmother? I can't say that she's based on anybody except she represents the very best of us all. I had somebody at a book club last week say that reading Sarah Creamer makes her want to be better than she is.
Yeah, and Sarah really represents something beyond Anderson, sort of this whole, I've always told people that South Carolina and really should have been like Western North Carolina, South Carolina, Northeast Georgia, East Tennessee.
Yeah.
Those are the people who are very similar.
That's right.
She could have been in White Pine, Tennessee, just as easily as Anderson,
Totally.
So she represents the South, and we all knew, if you grew up here, you knew people like that.
That's right.
And,
of course, we haven't talked about Ike Thrasher.
No, and now, of course, the Thrashers, Thrasher family and Skins is...
Yeah, I know. But there was a Thrasher family that lived down the road from us, and I don't think were connected with Skins. But I don't know why his name just came up, but that's another Anderson name, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ike Thrasher.
And we all knew guys like Ike. People didn't know what to say and do with, the kind folks were kind, and it just, the other folks were not.
Yeah, and then the McDuffie Street boarding house.
Still right across the street here.
Yeah, we're at it right now.
Boarding house. We're at the Anderson County Library, and talking about that while we're there, we'll come right back to the boarding house.
Yeah.
You said you did a lot of your research here in the South Carolina
Right here. I camped out here. I spent enough dimes in those copy machines from looking at newspapers and copying them. I think I funded a salary. In fact, I know I did. I was at that machine over there. I did tons of research, Greg, because I wanted it to be authentic. I wanted to know how much saltines were, how much pork and beans cost, the kinds of, the brands back in the day. The scene with the choking scene for Luther Dobbins at the Calhoun Hotel, that actually took place, and I got that out of the newspaper here. Unfortunately, the farmer in real life died, but my Luther lives. How about Shoe of the Week? Shoe of the Week, I didn't even know about it. I got that out of the newspaper, sitting right over there in my research. Wellborn shoes on the square. I put that in my novel. Walter Gilliard, an actual broadcaster here, who actually announced the Shoe of the Week. And so that just felt so awesome to be able to get into those kinds of real memories here in this town.
And the fact that, back to there's still a boarding house across the street.
Yeah, and so that's where Ike lived.
Yeah.
And remember, the Greasy Spoon sign.
Yeah.
That's one of you're just making me remember so much. Because I remember on Thursday nights, my dad worked at the post office, and he would come get us, and we would go, not every Thursday night, but the curb people, curb boys, I guess, outside, and how that neon light danced. It appeared to dance with the grease. Gosh, grease.
Yeah, my
jumping
kids
off.
now go, what are you talking about, greasy spoon?
I know, greasy spoon. I know, but I had, because that was, and I still have an old menu from 1961 from the greasy spoon. See, I love history. And I just had to put that in my novel. And so, Ike Thrasher goes there and kind of moves his feet to that dancing spoon with the grease.
Townhouse right next.
Townhouse right next to it. Yeah, yeah.
I know. Uptown if you went to the townhouse.
Oh, I know. That was hoity-toity, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
You ever miss Anderson?
I do, every day. Every day. I'm here a lot. And, I was just having breakfast with Catherine Smith, who, lives here. And yeah, it is. It's very special to me. And writing this book reminds me of how special it is and how much its fabric is in my DNA. And it contributed to the kind of person I became and am still becoming. So Anderson is part of my fabric. And I like to think, Greg, that this novel, One Good Mama Bone, is actually a love letter to Anderson from me.